Hey everyone, welcome to the Optimism Show. Today we have Earth to Travis, who is a core contributor at DAOHaus, and he's currently building Farcastle. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you, sir. It's wonderful to be here.
It's a pleasure having you, actually. Like before we get into the actual uh, content of the episode, I'd love for our listeners to hear more about you because, like, since we talked, I know you have vast experience both in like the traditional finance sector, in DAOs, and like you're working on some exciting projects also with Farcastle. So, would love to hear from your perspective for our listeners to know exactly who you are and what you're doing here.
Well, I'll try to keep it brief. All this gray beard was earned through trials and tribulations, but I've been building software since I was a wee lad. Kind of got my first tokens in 2014 and lost a little faith after the ICO craze, but was working in financial services and innovation for a big bank in Europe at that point in time, and was a bit late to DeFi summer. But when COVID hit, kind of my previous business model broke, which required travel to Europe. And so it was a existential crisis. And one of my close friends was like, I don't know why you're not full-time crypto. So I just dove full on into the rabbit hole, started contributing to some DeFi projects, and found an investor that was interested in building an NFT marketplace. And so I put together the team, and we spent 9 months kind of building out that software to launch the first fractional NFT marketplace right when Arbitrum had first come out. Unfortunately, that investor rugged us right before launch and disappeared. And so it was kind of a welcome to the space, more or less. But at that point in time, it was really, don't really want to focus on DeFi, even though I believe in it. NFTs are cool, but it's art, and that's not necessarily, my primary focus. But really believe in human coordination, and got involved in DAOs, and specifically DAOHaus, and that's been my mission ever since.
That's amazing. Like before, I just have one question over there before we dive really deeper into these concepts, which I'd love to cover all of them really. But when it comes to, which is kind of a salty welcome to the crypto space like that, I'd love to hear like what are some things that maybe back then you figured out with the launch and what happened over there that right now are impacting how you think and how you're approaching the challenges in your newer ventures and your newer projects.
Yeah. So it has really shaped and strengthened my kind of faith in what we're doing. One, if we would have had a smart contract and our agreements had been locked in escrow, that would have never been a problem. We wouldn't have spent 2 months working on something and waiting for an invoice that never got paid. So that's one. And two, kind of unruggability has become a theme in what I do and what I build. And how can we protect the people that are investing? How can we protect the people that are contributing? And specifically, Unruggable crowdfunding is the tagline for my Yeeter project.
And tell us a bit more about that. Like what exactly you're doing there, because it's kind of interesting. Like that ruggability has become really commonplace in the industry. So how are you? And it's quite a challenge. But how are you approaching that challenge? And like, what are your ideas there to actually coordinate and actually make a project unruggable and being able to benefit and coordinate a lot of people at the same time?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think people like the risk. And so the Unruggable hasn't been a value proposition that's really resonating as much as that kind of does not make sense. That's been an unfortunate realization for me over the past couple of years. But the Malik DAO contracts that we build pretty much everything on top of have a feature called Rage Quit, and that provides these minority protections. And so with Yeeter specifically, anybody can contribute to the campaign. So you have a vision for some type of idea that you want to crowdfund. Anybody can add tokens to your treasury and get their kind of financial stake in your project. And so if you should ever decide, or if the community is not happy with the progress that you're making, they have the ability to rage quit. And that's removing any of the funds that they contributed to your campaign that hadn't already been spent. So one, it provides the protections for them as an investor to say, hey, this team has a reason to continue making progress, to continue sharing the results. And two, it provides the team some type of accountability, and that, they need to do those things, because if not, then they risk kind of losing that funding.
That makes perfect sense, actually. And when it comes to DAOs in general, since I know that you've been really integrated in the DAO space, like in the past, let's say a few weeks, I've had multiple interviews with people in the DAO space, and we covered different challenges. But from your perspective, are really DAOs failing because of bad ideas, or simply because the lack of trust, or just because people kind of fail at and suck at coordinating each other and don't know what is happening over there?
Wow. We could probably spend the next year talking about what is wrong with DAOs. There are so many things. So let's figure out where we should start. I definitely think we're DAOing it wrong. I think emulating corporations rather than bands is a huge mistake. I think trying to scale these operations before we get them figured out is a huge mistake. And ultimately, governance is hard, and coordination is hard. And with so many DAOs and so much technology, we've thrown out kind of history of learning about governance, about coordinating software development projects. And there is so much rejection that I think we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And there's also kind of a mercenary mindset in DAOs. And think that is one of the beauties of blockchains, but it's also one of the curses. Yeah. And so I think we have to figure out how to get smaller groups together that can support themselves and help each other win. And once we have those systems dialed in, maybe bringing in additional people and expanding the family.
And on that point, which I think it's like a very interesting analogy, instead of DAOs emulating big corporations, which when you think about it, blockchain was created as a rebellion towards those big corporations, and having DAOs more emulates like smaller bands of people. I know you're working on something similar with Farcastle as well, which is really transforming channels into DAOs and uniting people and helping with coordination and et cetera, et cetera. Tell me a bit about how does Farcastle as a project differentiate from what we currently have maybe in the DAO space out there? And what exactly are you aiming to achieve with Farcastle as a project, and what kind of impact would it have in the DAO space? Because I know it's quite different from what we normally see in the space.
Yeah. So, at a high level, Farcastle turns channels into DAOs. So we are using the Warpcast interface
Mhm.
as a new interface to the Moloch DAO contracts. And so from my perspective, the hope is that we can create more composable organizations and composability of teams, of tools, of the technology, but also more ephemeral organizations, that we don't need to create these institutions that we want to, survive for 100 years, that teams can come together for collective action on shorter term objectives and have an end date, have these objectives time boxed to say we are going to achieve this by this date. And if that doesn't happen, that provides an opportunity to evaluate what went wrong, what we might change the next time. And I believe that's also something that we're not really doing well in DAOs, is taking our lessons learned and iterating and coming up on kind of the next version of what we're trying to achieve as an organization. And that's been a lot of my frustration with some of the DAOs that I've been active in for so long, is it's just like the same old story over and over and over. And when you've got 100, really big brain dudes in a Discord server, everybody's got great ideas, but it's really hard to change the direction of that ship, or actually, make an impact. And that's what we're fighting against. And so that's really frustrating.
Oh, that also comes in the, well, let me know if it's related or not. I just actually right before recording, I just read that practically crypto doesn't really have that big of a problem with like human resources and like ideas. It has a problem on execution, and
Yeah.
that's the space when you're seeing most DAOs, even like from an outsider perspective, it's like, okay, these ideas are amazing, but what about now? Like, what
Right.
happens? What's the next step? So, from my understanding, like, really what you're building with Farcastle is taking that big, high level vision and helping smaller teams create smaller, more accomplishable goals that can be achieved along the way, so that there's some kind of movement and there's actually movement or and progress towards what they're aiming for as a team, rather than just the.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is to empower collective action. There's this concept of the armchair anarchist, or the armchair quarterback that sits on the sidelines and has all of the great ideas for what could or should be happening that's not, and has this critical feedback. But they're not in the trenches. They're not out there, throwing the pass or tossing the Molotov cocktail. And you know, in DAOs, you hear "we should" more than just about anything else. Oh, we should do this. We should do that. And everybody's got an opinion on what we should do, not what they did. And so I would love to see a shift in "we did this," not "we should do that."
Like when you think about it, kind of like politics.
It is. It is. And that's, some of the stuff that just drives me crazy is like we're emulating academia and we're emulating bureaucracy. And it's like, no, 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 no. That is the wrong direction. And unfortunately, when you have an organization that has to decide what to do with financial resources, everybody wants to get their little piece of it. And so figuring out ways to to address that, and figuring out ways to get the capital to the teams that are out there hustling, that are out there actually making an impact. That's really important to me.
And on that point, especially since actually slightly going to change the topic here and go back to Farcastle, because with Farcastle you're focusing a lot more on the hands-on teams that are actively working and creating practically a DAO, an organization to a Farcaster channel around that. I'm really curious because on one side we analyze the bigger DAOs, they have 1001 problems and we can chat about that. But I'm curious about when it comes to these smaller DAOs, this creating these smaller organizations that practically have a start time and an end time. Like, what are the challenges that maybe you encountered around along the way, and what are some things that are not really being paid attention to and that need to be thought about to eventually make them successful, to make these bands of people successful, and to get people moving and creating stuff that they would like to create. Honestly, a lot of people would like to create.
Yeah. Getting these bands funded is one of the bigger problems that we see. The big DAOs, they're the ones that have the financial resources. And so you really have to play their games in order to, receive the rewards for those type of systems. We want to help channels kind of become their own organization. And that could be that could be an offshoot of a big DAO, right? Optimism is not necessarily going to use Farcastle to manage their entire operation, but they could turn their channel on Workcast into its own DAO to give that some autonomy, to allow them to decide, what's important for that channel and that growth and that kind of angle. So that's something that we really haven't seen yet. But, these smaller orgs, I think, we're seeing this now with some of these product development meme coins, that a small team with the right resources can go fast and can make a difference. And so figuring out how to kind of bridge that gap from what we've historically known as DAOs and what we think DAOs are or will be, into demonstrating the capabilities. I think that's important. Let's start talking about what they are and what they will be, and let's start doing it and showing it and proving it and learning from our mistakes and sharing our victories so other people can incorporate kind of those learnings into their organization.
I mean, on that point also that you just mentioned, like distributing, like getting these bands funded, like these smaller bands funded. Considering the reputation in general in the space, like in how many, I would say, like how many farmers there are even farming DAOs, let's say especially farming DAOs and channels and similar. Um, there arises the question and the challenge that practically who to fund and who not to fund, even, or even how to approach the entire funding, the funding challenge, because there's only, if you see it, regardless of what the grant, or like regardless of how much money there is, there's always going to be reached a limit if everyone gets funded eventually. Right. So what are your thoughts on, because also I see like a lot of DAOs are struggling to get this, like oftentimes even it happens like actually amazing projects don't necessarily get the grants, but a lot of projects that just disappear after some time do get grants and do survive from grants. So, which is also from my perspective, I think it's like a coordination issue. But like, what are your thoughts on that? And how would you even? I wouldn't necessarily ask you to solve that because it's definitely probably quite a challenge to solve. But
Hmm.
where should we even start looking, or what should we even consider to approach a challenge like that, to make sure that, for example, the small bands to start with are we pick the ones that are truly going out there to do something.
Yeah. It's certainly a broken system from my perspective. Um, you know, we're coming away from a broken system, I believe, in VC funding and kind of what that has resulted in, and replace that with this, bureaucratic grant programs and the effort that goes into actually having to, fill out an application or continuing to shield to raise, for your round and stuff. That rewards a certain type of team or personality or role within that team that doesn't necessarily equate to the people that are putting in the most effort to work on something or to come up with new and creative ideas. And I think Yeeter in my hope and crowdfunding is a big step forward in that and the accountability that we talked about before. But I would really like to see a new model with some of the bigger grant giving organizations where they give smaller upfront, you know, grants, say enough runway for 30 days or enough runway for 90 days, and then revisit that to say, hey, these were the things that you said you were going to deliver in that time. These are the things that you actually did or did not deliver in that time. Why or why not? And then providing some retroactive funding at that point to the teams that really made a difference, to the teams that really, kicked ass and went above and beyond. They get rewarded at that point. So you get just enough funding to prove yourself, and then you get the financial incentives for following through.
That's actually an interesting approach, and kind of sounds as the obvious approach, but I haven't really heard about it previously. Because if you think about it, there's so many teams that would love to do something and would love to contribute, but then they don't really have the resources to get it started. And
Yeah.
oftentimes it happens that teams have to pay out of their own pocket and then hope on retroactive funding or maybe getting a grant in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, retroactive funding, it's just the wrong way. That's a reward. It's not the salary. It's not what pays the bills. That's the gravy that we can add on top, and that should be the motivation for going above and beyond. But we can't count on that. So we need something that we can count on, and then we need a reward for coming through.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. And also, I'm going to mix in the topic of decentralized social over here, and let's mix in Farcaster as well. When it comes to Farcastle and turning the smaller channels into bands, into DAOs, and activity on Farcaster, um, how would you really like? What are some main things that right now you might see as obstacle in the Farcaster ecosystem to ensure the actual full development of Farcastle and the vision where you're headed?
We're still really early. The Farcaster community is still really small, and I actually think that that's a blessing more than a curse. Um, I think we still have a ways to go to demonstrate the value and to prove that there is something that is worthy of scaling. I believe in it wholeheartedly. But that is certainly, an issue with that community right now is we haven't seen, a lot of channels blow up. We haven't seen, real innovation in the coordination aspects of it. So there is still a lot of emulation. And right now there's more emulation of Twitter than there is Reddit. And so I do see that as an opportunity for channels to become a little bit more like Reddit than Twitter. And again, that has not happened yet. And right now it's a community of builders, and that's the beautiful thing is we've broken out of our Discord silos, and now we're kind of in a shared arena. And I'm able to see what other builders that I follow are working on. I'm able to see what they're struggling with. I'm able to see what they're winning or what they need tested. And that to me is something that makes the community absolutely amazing right now. And it's such a level up from what we've been trying to do on Discord for the past 4 or 5 years that I'm extremely bullish on it because, we're sharing, we're helping each other. We're testing each other's apps out. We're seeing, oh, someone was struggling with this issue that I just figured out. And so now I can help pull them up with me. And that to me is some of the coolest opportunities of why Farcaster at this moment in time.
Yeah, but that's also an interesting thing because it's a shared arena of builders, and I love how you said that. But it's also, I will just add here, it's also builders and creators in so many different areas. It's not just only crypto, which I think adds a nice layer to everything. And I have two last questions actually. My first one is about Farcastle as well, and also where, like, let's say Farcastle is where you envision it to be, and the goal is achieved. How would that world really look like, and what kind of impact could builders expect, and how would their lives maybe be different by using Farcastle when that goal is achieved, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So for me, exit to community, get out of the way, provide the tools that allow these people to kind of take collaboration and coordination to the next level. But for communities, it's about prioritizing the vibes. It's not about the technology. It's not about DAOs. It's about their vision and their values and their mission. And so that can take a wide range of what that might be. Could be feeding the homeless in your community, or it could be building, the next L2 protocol. And all of those things require communication. And to me, that should happen in the social feed. That we need to meet these people where they are, where these discussions are happening, and that is innately social. And so providing the tools that they need to make decisions together, to raise funds together, putting those in the feed and letting that just fade into the background. That, like we've seen with some of the AI stuff that's interacting, with just text. We don't have to go to a standalone interface now and connect our wallet and take 6 different steps to, bridge a token from one network to the other. We can do these things where we're already communicating. And that to me is one of the motivating things about Farcastle. And so seeing these teams kind of come together for collective action, whatever that may be, and sharing those results and inspiring other communities to be able to do that's my hope.
And if a builder right now, let's say, I think those are some excellent points, especially because there are a lot of builders that just like to build and not necessarily focus that much on the community aspect. They would like to show up, but that's about it. Not
Hmm.
enough to grind all day on the community. They'd rather just make a better product. So if there's
Right.
a builder that sees real value in like collaborating with Farcastle right now, like what can
Hmm.
they do actually make that happen?
That's a really cool thought. And until you mentioned it, I hadn't really considered that use case. But I'm thinking that if a builder just has his own channel or her own channel, and it could be their name or it could be their idea for whatever their concept is. But if they just use that channel and just share their progress and actually build in public, say, hey, today I was working on interfaces. Today I wired up a smart contract. And they're just sharing what they're working on openly. Hopefully, there will be a community that organically forms around that and just to monitor their progress. Something like, vibe coding on a live stream, right? Like those people are just, you know, doing what they would normally do. They just kind of flip on the camera. And then, an audience develops around that. I would like to hope that if somebody just, spits out a cast or shares some screenshots in a channel, that people are going to naturally be interested in keeping up with their progress. And then ideally, once they see, wow, this dude, you know, he's doing a great job. We like what he's building. Provide some type of financial support to enable that to continue.
Then eventually, how could they collab with Farcastle, and like at what point should they even consider collaborating with Farcastle and with you to get that to the next level?
Anytime they're ready, I think it's really easy to spin up some DAO contracts. And I've been spinning up DAO contracts when it's just me and two homies collaborating on a project just to get the practice, get the reps in, to model the behaviors that I want to see for bigger organizations. So even if it's just one, there's no reason why you can't fund a treasury for your solo project and then take out a payment for your monthly bills and have that information documented on screen. So I would totally be down to collaborate with a solo founder or, the next big protocol.
It's amazing. Travis, one last question. Is there anything else that maybe I should have asked you and skipped, didn't ask, that you believe is very important to mention while we're on camera?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is core to a lot of the problems that we've discussed is organizations haven't led with their vision. They haven't led with the mission and what they're trying to achieve and the values of that organization. And I think that that's necessary to address a lot of these issues, to, you know, incorporate the ephemeral nature of it, to provide something for people to react to. And that is going to help us, build communities as people either say, I'm really aligned with that and I want to support it, or I disagree and I don't want to be involved. I think both are okay. I think there's been too much vague, undefined what we're trying to accomplish, why we bring things together, and that makes it difficult to change and makes it difficult to make progress. And so I think having organizations lead with that instead of having that as an afterthought is really going to help us level up.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, actually, and I completely agree with that. Well, Travis, it was actually a pleasure having you on the Optimism Show, and thank you for all these insights. And if anyone wants to check out Farcastle, actually, and chat with Travis. We'll post the links in the description below.
Thank you so very much, Chris. I really appreciate you having me, and already looking forward to our next conversation.